All right. So we're being recorded. And again, please mute so we don't get a lot of feedback and that sort of thing. So thanks everybody for joining. All right. This is our call to order for our first meeting of the Michigan Dam Safety Task Force. We are going to start by doing some introductions around the line of the folks that are participating on the Dam Safety Task Force. I'm going to remind you that this is a public meeting, and so we certainly appreciate everybody participating and listening in. But the dialogue and question is going to be amongst the task force members at this point in time, and we will be taking public comment at the end of the meeting today. We'll go ahead and get started. So first, what I'm going to ask our task force members to do is I'm going to call roll for the task force members. I'm going to ask you all just to spend a minute or two introducing yourself. I know it's always a little bit trickier in this virtual environment, but you know, as Evan said when he got on, we're all getting a little used to it by now. So if you don't mind turning your camera on if you can for your introduction, just so that we can all get familiar with each other, I think that would be really helpful. And so with that, we'll go in alphabetical order. So I'm going to call on my colleague, Paul Adjaba, who's the director of the Department of Transportation here in Michigan. So Paul, are you with us? And I see Paul, and I think he is raising his hand and getting off mute and turning on his camera. So he'll be right here. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
I don't know what's going on. I kept getting muted. I don't know what you guys heard, but my name is Paul Adjaba. I am the director of the Michigan Department of Transportation. Thanks to Director Clark for including us in this task force, and looking forward to helping in any way we can to contribute to the progress of this task force. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you, Director Adjaba. Next, I'm going to ask Mindy Bacon to turn on her camera and introduce herself. Mindy is with SME.
Hi, I'm Melinda Bacon, or Mindy Bacon nickname, with Soil and Materials Engineers, now SME. I've been here for 24 years, Michigan Tech and Wayne State Masters, Michigan Tech undergrad, geological engineering, and I pretty much do geotechnical engineering, roads and bridges for DOT projects. So that's not
great. Thanks, Mindy. Next, I'm going to ask John Broshak to introduce himself from Consumers Energy. John?
So good afternoon, everyone. John Broshak. My title is Vice President of Generation Operations and Compression with Consumers Energy. In that capacity, I have responsibility for our 13 river hydros and Ludington pump storage facility, all regulated by FERC. And so we have some pretty extensive experience in the power generation area of dam safety, but also incorporating lessons learned from Oroville, and then working with all of our state partners on the various projects related to our hydro facilities. So very excited to contribute with this group, and hopefully we can move things forward for the entire state in terms of dam safety. Thank you.
Great, thanks, John. Next, I'd like to ask Brian Burrows to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Brian Burrows. I'm the Executive Director for Michigan Trout Unlimited, and let's see, I studied dams and dam removals across Michigan for my master's and PhD programs, and am involved with a variety of dam relicensing and removals unlimited. And I'm joined behind the scenes by my support with Bob Stuber, who is with the Michigan Hydro Relicensing Coalition and has a long career of working with hydro management for the U.S. Forest Service.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Glad you're here. Glad to have Bob as well. I'm next alphabetically. So I'm Liesl Clark, as I mentioned before. I'm the director of Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. I am also extremely fortunate to be joined by a fantastic dam safety staff and a variety of folks from our Water Resources Division and from other areas within the department. You'll be meeting those folks as we get a little bit further along here today. So, but looking forward to hearing more from them as well. So continuing through my alphabetical journey, next is Director Eichinger from the Department of Natural Resources. Danny on.
Good everybody. My name is Dan Eichinger. I'm the director of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and appreciate Director Clark and her staff for putting this conversation together, and look forward to this afternoon's discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. Next on the list is Brett Fessel. Brett's invited to participate with us. He's ecologist, a river restoration ecologist from the Grand Traverse Bay of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. Brett is still working through some final steps in terms of making him official. But Brett, would you like to introduce yourself in the meantime, and we'll hope that the rest of the pieces fall into place?
Sure. Thank you, Lisa, and thank the rest of you. And yeah, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm honored to sit on this. And yeah, it's really a formality. You have to work these sorts of requests through tribal council, and we just had an election, so as you can imagine, there's a lot of ground for them to cover. So this is just on the list. I don't expect any concerns or issues. And so yeah, I've worked for the tribe as an ecologist for 25 years now. And have been involved in the Boardman River Restoration Project involving multiple dams, as a lot of you probably are aware. And so, yeah, this is near and dear to my heart, and I am looking forward to learning more and hopefully helping out. So thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Glad to have you. Next is Dr. Marty Holtgren. Marty, I think I saw your picture. Where'd you go on my screen? You're here. There you are.
Thank you, Director Clark, and hello to the other task group members. I'm Marty Holgren, and I am representing the Muskegon River Watershed Assembly. The Assembly is doing a watershed-wide dam reconnaissance study currently in dam planning, where we look at many different factors that go into dam planning. Also been involved in numerous other dam removals, including those in Flint, Grand Rapids, and then the Muskegon River watershed. Worked with the Great Lakes Fishery Trust, the scientific advisory team, for the FERC relicensing that recently took place there, and really excited to be part of this process and joining some of my colleagues I've worked with such as Brian Burrows, Bob Stuber, Brett Fessel, and Bill Rustum. So thank you, Director Clark, for putting the group together.
Great. Thank you, Marty, for the time. Next is Dr. Dana Infante. Dana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Infante. I am currently an assistant director with Ag Bio Research at Michigan State University. And in that role, I promote relationships between MSU and our natural resource partners, but I am also a professor in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. I've studied dam effects on fishes in a couple contexts in the state of Michigan, and I'm also involved in some national efforts to understand fragmentation of river networks in the Columbia River Basin, and I work with the Department of Energy and Oak Ridge National Lab on identifying metrics to evaluate hydropower projects. Thank you.
You can tell why we're excited to have Dr. Infante on the task force. Thank you. Next, Douglas Jester from 5 Lakes Energy. Douglas, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, or good afternoon, rather, Director. Thank you. I'm Douglas Jester. I'm managing partner of 5 Lakes Energy. 5 Lakes Energy is a consultancy based here in Michigan, working primarily on policy and regulatory matters related to electricity generation. From 1977 to 1999, I was employed by the state of Michigan, primarily in the Department of Natural Resources. Before environmental quality, now EGLE, was separated from that. And for most of the 1980s and first part of the 1990s, I, amongst other things, led the team that handled the FERC licensing issues for hydropower facilities in Michigan. I'm trained both as a fisheries ecologist and as an economist. And in addition to dealing with the regulatory issues on those dams, have sometimes done natural resource damage assessment related to problems either with the operation of dams or their existence.
Great, thank you, Douglas. And again, you can see why this is a pretty exciting, esteemed group of task force members. Next, I have Mr. Kochever, the General Manager of Cleveland Cliffs. Jim, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I certainly will. Good afternoon, Liesl and all. My name is Jim Kochever. I'm the Vice President of Mining and Pelletizing for Cleveland Cliffs and the General Manager of Cliffs, Michigan operations. I'm a mechanical engineer out of the University of Minnesota, licensed in both Minnesota and Michigan. In previous life, I had St. Anthony Falls Hydro in a portfolio of plants in Minneapolis. And currently within Cliffs, we privately hold 14 dams that we manage. So welcome this opportunity. Looking forward to participating with the group. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks, Jim. Next, Paul Lamaka. Paul is with Stantec, and he's also a member of the Association of Dam Safety Officials. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Liesl. Yeah, thank you very much. It's Paul Maloka, and I'm a project engineer for Stantec. We are a full-service engineering company. I've got about 24 years experience in engineering. I work on dams, including spillway mechanical, concrete repair, and dam safety and inspection. And I'm very happy to be here and hopefully contribute to the effort. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Tanya Plazlowski, President of Michigan Electric and Gas Association. Tanya. Oh, I thought I saw her pop on from the waiting room. Tanya, you might be on mute. There's
mute. I'm still flummoxed by the mute button. Sorry, everybody.
Too.
Hi, good afternoon. As mentioned, I'm president of the Michigan Electric and Gas Association, and we represent several utilities that own and operate dams in the Upper Peninsula. So look forward to getting to know everyone and working with you.
Great, thanks, Tanya. Next, Evan Pratt, Water Resources Commissioner for Washtenaw County. Evan.
Hi, I'm Evan Pratt. I'm the Water Resource Commissioner for Washtenaw. As the director mentioned, I'm also the past DPW director in this county as well. And I've only been doing those things for about 8 years. My past background is about 25 years as a municipal engineering consultant, primarily spent quite a bit of time on rainfall analytics, flow monitoring for storm and sanitary. So I know a little bit about rain analytics, that type of thing. It's a fancy way of saying I started my career throwing smoke bombs in sanitary sewers and trying to figure out what happens after all of that. I'm pretty impressed with everybody's technical background here. So I really look forward on serving with this committee. Full disclosure, as people have mentioned, I don't have as many regulated facilities under 315 or 307 as some of the other folks, but we've got 9 of them. 3 of those I think people would recognize as what looks like a dam. 2 of those are in that moderate risk category. So certainly we have worked with the dam safety unit in my area. I think my one claim to fame is I might be the only person on here to willingly have accepted a 1940s era dam within the last 4 or 5 years, just because I thought that was a good thing to do from a public policy standpoint. So look forward to working with you all on our rather broad charge.
Great, thank you, Evan. Next, we've got Bill Rustum. So Bill, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Bill Rustum, and I'm I've been around state government for a long time. I worked for the Milliken administration. I had a company called Public Sector Consultants, and then I worked for the Snyder administration, and been around public policy and DNR and conservation and environmental issues for a long time in Michigan.
Great, thank you, Bill. Appreciate having you.
Mm-hmm.
Next, the chairman of the Michigan Public Service Commission, Dan Scripps. Dan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Director Clark. I'm Dan Scripps. I chair the Michigan Public Service Commission. We have regulatory oversight for rates, but not for safety of the dams owned by the investor-owned utilities in Michigan. We also approve PURPA contracts for the power purchase agreements with some of the non-utility owned electric generation dams.
Thank you. Next, Dr. Stan Vitten from Michigan Tech. Stan, did I say your last name correctly? You might be on mute. Oh, I thought I saw him sign on too. Dr. Vitten, if you're with us, we'd love for you to introduce yourself. And I'm going to take a minute longer because I see that you're there, but you're on mute. So if you're trying to get off mute, we'll give you another second. Okay, well, Dr. Vitten, if you can let us know, raise your hand maybe when you are able to get off mute, and we'll come back to you. Okay, next, Abby Watkins, who's the Director of Emergency Services in Newaygo County, and I have heard on good authority that she's the best emergency manager in the state, so don't say that to others, but that's the rumor that I've heard.
Well, thank you so much for that, Lisa. I greatly appreciate it. I'm Abby Watkins. I'm the Director of Newaygo County Emergency Services. I've been in emergency management now for 17 years, and I specialize in emergency preparedness, as well as emergency response, emergency operations plans, as well as community awareness and community involvement. We are fortunate enough, we have the third largest earthen dam east of the Mississippi. We have the Hardy Dam, which is a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission dam. So that is, I think, 2 times bigger than the Sanford Dam and Edenville. So dam safety, dam response, emergency planning is kind of one of the things that we emphasize quite a bit here in my community, as well as coordinating with my community partners. So I'm looking forward to bringing some of that knowledge to this group from a little bit of a different perspective.
Great, thanks, Abby. Really appreciate that. And finally, we have Glenn Wigzorek. Glenn, I apologize. As someone named Liesel, I do take pride in being able to say people's names, even though I said Paul Lamoka's wrong. I did write it down. So Glenn, help me out.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. Last name is Wizorek. The C is silent, if that helps anybody. I'm the engineer at the Ann Arbor Water Treatment Plant. I've been a professional engineer for about 25 years now. At the city, I oversee and manage all the projects for the dams since about 2005, so about 15 years now. So that's design, construction, maintenance, regulatory reporting. The city owns 4 dams. They're all in the Huron River. They are all high hazard dams, and some of them are old as 1912, so well over 100 years now. That, of course, presents some significant challenges for us. The dams, they serve 3 main purposes. One is a source of recreation. We have over 2,000 patrons on the river on these dams on a hot Saturday afternoon. 2 of them generate power, so they're FERC regulated. 2 of them are state regulated. And lastly, one of the dams, the impoundment, serves as our primary drinking water source for the city of Ann Arbor and its constituents. So, you know, we're talking over 120,000 people. So the dams serve as pretty important components of our infrastructure. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Glenn. I think you can see why we're glad to have Glenn with us. All right, looping back to Dr. Vitten. Stan, I think I saw your hand up.
Okay, I did. I put it up. Can you all see me? I can't see me, but
we can see you. Looks great,
and
I can see your hand up. Thank you.
Hey, I'm you know, being an academic, I'm a Zoom guy, not a Microsoft Team guy. So I apologize.
But obviously you learn quickly, so
that's quite all right. I'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch of me. I'm a professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Michigan Tech. I spent 10 years with a Shell Oil Company in their mining division. I was involved in the permitting activities of a number of mines in Montana, Wyoming, West Virginia, Ohio. Very involved with especially some of the sedimentation pond dams that we had to build, reclaim, remove, that sort of thing. So that was my industrial experience. I've been at Michigan Tech 27 years now. I'm currently the project manager for a FEMA project on our Father's Day flood here in 2018, in which we got a 1,000-year event, they tell me. Anyway, I'm in charge of fixing the historic Red Ridge Dam. It's a 92-foot high steel dam. It was built, started in 1899, finished in 1901. In addition, my family has a dam that's under permit, 230 acres, and that I do the inspection on. And it was built in 1958 by my father. It was funded by the Soil Conservation Service. Any case, that's sort of my background, and I'm glad to be here. Be interesting task force.
Great. Thank you, Stan. We're glad to have you. All right, and that rounds out our task force. Thanks for all the introductions. If you're following along on your agenda, we're going to talk a little bit now about the charge. Actually, before we step into the charge, I saw that we had Representative Annette Glenn. I'm curious if we've got other either reps or senators that want to announce themselves. Rep. Glenn, would you like to say hi?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. I appreciate all of your expertise, and I am very impressed and look forward to learning a lot from listening to each of you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for listening, and we're glad to have you. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the charge, and then we'll go into some of the kind of logistics behind us. But we've really set up today's meeting to do the grounding work that's necessary to launch the task force. So you've seen the agenda and meeting notice. For those of you that are following along with us, it's available on our website. And I'm excited to announce, hot off the press, new website, michigan.gov/when I tried it off the top of my head, MI Dam Safety Task Force. So MI for Michigan Dam Safety Task Force. So that's a little bit shorter than the rest of the gobbledygook, but all the materials will be posted there. Minutes, name of task force members, the meetings themselves as you record them, additional presentations, things like that. That'll be your kind of go-to place for all the materials. So before we get more into some of the organizational pieces, I wanted to set up a bit of what we're here to do. And I think that none of this will be a real big surprise to anyone who's joining us, because you've probably been following along and understanding that this is in response to the historic rain event that led to the dam failure and the catastrophic 500-year flood that we saw in mid-Michigan, which really illuminated in many ways the consequences of inadequately investing in our state's infrastructure, which is something that I think many of the members of the task force know something about. That failure also points to potential improvements that we can look at in policies, procedures, funding and regulation. The ongoing investigation and reviews will analyze and provide recommendations in these areas and others. And frankly, at EGLE, we're interested in seeing all of that. We take very seriously our mission to protect public health and the environment. And the catastrophe that we saw in Edenville and Sanford really underscores how important that work is. At EGLE, our values reflect our commitment to service, and our values are really organized around that. In fact, one of ours is leading by serving the public. We also focus on making reasoned decisions that are founded in science. We particularly are working to emphasize communication and meeting communities where they're at. And in fact, Representative Glenn mentioned we had a meeting just this morning to talk with the local units of government about steps forward in that area. And also we value that leadership ability of our team and investing in our team. We're really eager for these public discussions with the diverse stakeholder group that comes together around the Dam Safety Task Force to look at our dam safety program and frankly that larger challenge to the state of thousands of dams and how those dams are managed by entities that are both public and private. So we'll explore a lot of issues together, things that might include the public and private ownership of dams, the strength of the legal authority to influence outcomes necessary for public safety, obviously ecological concerns, interaction of regulatory authority between local, state, and federal partners, and I'm sure many more things will be uncovered in the course of our conversations. Today, we'll lay the foundation for the next few sessions together, and we'll dive deeper into some of these topics. At the end of the day, we have some open dialogue set aside to talk amongst the task force about what sort of things you want to see specifically presented. Before we go a lot further, though, I thought I'd outline some of the investigations that are already in process so that we have a grounding amongst everybody on the line about what's ongoing. So the first piece is the forensics investigation. So the forensics investigation was set up just starting actually a few weeks ago in mid-August. The forensics investigation team is made up of 5 experts who were involved in the Oroville, California dam collapse, the investigation in that a few years ago. They are John France, Irfan Elvey, Jennifer Williams, Steve Higginbotham, and Arthur Miller. And those folks are leading the independent work. Our team from a state of Michigan perspective is certainly available for data, for interviews, et cetera. But that work is very much being led by the independent team that will result in a report in 12 to 18 months talking about the failure of both Sanford and Edenville Dam. It is funded by FERC. That's something that's typically funded by the dam owner. Unfortunately, that did not work out in this scenario. And because we are talking about a series of 4 dams, and of course, many of you are understanding this is very much intertwined with FERC as well, FERC was able to step up and move that forward. You're also going to learn more about an investigation being conducted by the Association of State Dam Safety Officials. And we'll hear more on a presentation today by Luke Trumbull from the Michigan EGLE Dam Safety Group, who's going to talk a bit about ASDSO and the research work that they're doing. They started late June in doing a review of the EGLE program. Sorry, I get to be the first one with the dog barking. I apologize. And then, of course, the task force work that we're doing together. So in the meantime, action continues both legally and on the ground in the community. As Representative Glenn mentioned, we had a review even just earlier this morning to talk a bit about the ongoing work happening on the ground. We had a variety of people, I think around 50 to 60 participate today, and more than 100 people participate in a meeting last week as well. We at EGLE have been working closely with our colleagues at MDOT and together brought on AECOM as a contractor. The piece that there's a lot of discussion about right now is the remaining component of the dam. So the tobacco side, there continues to be a structure in place. And as I think many folks are aware, there are significant issues with where the riverbed is, where the channels are, et cetera, that have implications into the transportation challenges in the region. So you can see why we have so many different folks represented in this discussion, because it's necessary to really get us to the best possible solutions. So that team, including MDOT, AECOM, and EGLE, have been talking about what are the next side steps for the tobacco component that remains. And again, that was part of the discussion publicly made this morning and ongoing work that's happening on the ground. While we won't be focusing a lot deeply in those particular issues, certainly it's intertwined in the broader conversation that we all will be having here together. So with that, I'm just going to take a pause and see before, oh, we're right on time. Look at that. Before I launch into task force organization and getting us kind of more moving into the meat of the agenda, I'm just going to take a break there and see if there's any questions. All right, everybody looks good. We're going to keep going. So right here, right on time at 1:30. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the agenda in front of us. We're going to approve the agenda, look at the upcoming meeting schedule, and then look at the governing document that you received. If all of that looks great, we'll talk through it. Then we'll move to nominate a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary, and I will hand it off to the chair, and I will no longer have to be your fearless leader. Then we will talk through a couple of presentations by my team. So you're going to get an overview of our dam program by Dan Devon, and then an overview of the ASDSO, which is the Association of State Dam Safety Officials, by Luke Trumbull. And then we've got some open discussion at the end, and we'll receive public comment before we close it out. So that's our agenda in front of us. First, I'm going to see if we would like to approve the agenda. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda that was just laid in front of you?
Pratt will move the agenda.
Pratt moves the agenda. Do I have a second?
Douglas Chester.
Second by Douglas. All right, any discussion on the agenda that's in front of you? All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the agenda is formally in front of us. Thank you. Next, we're going to review the upcoming meeting schedule. So I want to say first off that I understand that not everybody can do everything. You know, we were debating whether we do doodle polls and all that kind of good stuff. And so my inclination was just to try to throw some dates out there and try to catch as many folks as we could with those dates. So I'm going to put those in front of you. And, you know, certainly if somebody's going to miss, you know, 4 of them or something like that, I'd love to discuss it. But if those generally are looking good and, you know, feel like things that people can make a good faith effort to participate in, I'd like us to adopt that meeting schedule. So I'm just going to open it for discussion and see if there are discussion points on that meeting schedule.
Just one question. I noticed originally 3 hours was blocked out for the meeting, and it looks like it's going to be maybe a 2-hour meeting. Is that going to be the case? Typically 2 hours for each of these slots?
Well, I will no longer be your chair. I guess I'll still somewhat be your fearless leader. I don't really like virtual meetings that are more than 2 hours. I just don't feel like they're productive. If we need to do it at some point in order to get something over the goal line or wrap up a deliverable, you know, certainly we shall. But my inclination would be to try to keep them to 2 hours whenever we can.
Thank you.
Yep.
Lisa, this is Bill. I'll move approval of the meeting dates.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Do I have a second?
Douglas Chester.
Thanks, Douglas. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. All right, meeting schedule done. All right, governance documents. So let's talk through this together. You should have a draft of this. You should have received it this morning. So this is, some of you have done task force with me before. This is modeled off the UP Energy Task Force. So there's a few of you that are recurring task force friends, so you won't be too surprised. So largely talks about the regular meetings and setting the schedule ahead of time, special meetings. Obviously, we are a very transparent agency, so materials will be posted on the website, and obviously everything is subject to FOIA. There's some language in here governing how we will take public comment. I'm also pretty passionate about public comment. I think that's an important component of what we do. The idea is if you want to be with us ahead of time, you can set up a time and we'll try to allocate, we can allocate more time. And that might be a reason that we need the meetings to go longer, is if we've got a lot of public comment. If you're raising your hand or participating the day of, you'll receive 3 minutes. And then there might be reasons that we would want to have presentations on the agenda as well. So that's always available as we go forward. Everything needs to be public noticed. You'll receive that information ahead of time. The quorum is 51% of the task force. I hope we don't have to take any votes. If we do, you know, there's some language here to deal with voting. If any of my colleagues in state government are unable to attend, they can just let EGLE know so that we know who's going to be here. You've seen the structure we followed so far, so largely parliamentary procedure, just to keep it neat and tidy. You'll have an agenda ahead of time, and actually I'd like lots of input into the agenda, so hopefully nothing surprises anyone. We'll record everything. And then on page 2, we set out the structure of a chairperson, some chairperson duties, a vice chair, and a secretary. In large part, this will be staffed by EGLE and by some outside resources supporting us. And so I don't anticipate that these are heavy lifts, but do want to just document it so that we're all in agreement. And then under Article 3, hopefully this does not look surprising to anyone. This is largely what's been laid out in front of us in terms of the task force duty. So let's just spend a second here. Again, I hope this isn't surprising, but we're going to evaluate the statutory structure, budget, and program design of our dam safety program. the adequacy of our dam safety standards, and talk about the investment needed in Michigan dam infrastructure. This all culminates in a report to the governor and to the legislature to summarize our findings and make recommendations around regulation, financial support, and programmatic improvements. So again, I hope none of this is surprising to anyone, but just want to make it clear what we're doing here together. And sorry, I can't pay you. And we were dissolved 90 days after the end of the report. So with that, any discussion over the governance procedures document?
I just have a quick question. I know you said, this is Evan Pratt. I know you said that we're not anticipating a lot of voting, and certainly there isn't anything to vote on yet, but presumably the governor's executive order on voting for virtual meetings might apply if it's still in effect at this time. That'd be Article 2, Section 7 on the voting. We might have to take an individual voice vote if it's unclear if there's a strong majority or whatever, is the way I understand the way the past executive orders have been read. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Okay. Cross that bridge if we get there.
Yep. Yep. Good flag, Evan.
Lisa, this is John Broszak. So I see that section on support and budget. So do you anticipate us needing a budget for our initiative here with the time frame that we have and the task and charge ahead of us?
No, I don't anticipate that we will need one. It's just to be clear in terms of how we're supporting, but no, I think we do, to your point too, we do have a pretty brief timeline. From an EGLE perspective, we did put out an RFP a week or so ago to get some additional support to kind of keep the process of what we're doing from a task force perspective moving forward. As I mentioned earlier, we're running a few of these different task forces at the same time. And so it's just getting to a point where we're needing some extra hands. But I don't anticipate that we'll see more than that between here and the end of the year. And then we have some tentative dates struck for next year, 2021, that we'll talk about before we go further with those dates too. So.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, John. Thank you. Other questions on the governance document?
This is Douglas Jester. This may not need to be in the governance document, but I suggest that at some point you or someone from your staff review our obligations in terms of group communications by email and public records.
Yep. We have used in the past state commission email addresses for folks because we want to make sure that all correspondence happens, in a public way, but also it's sometimes easier if we have that, just concretely through state of Michigan, so that all your conversations about this work happen in that vein. Given the timeline with which we're doing this work, I'm not sure that that's going to make sense here, but that's an ongoing discussion. So certainly interested if anyone has feedback on that. I guess my inclination is because of how quickly and briefly we're going to be working, that probably wouldn't make sense for this task force, but always am interested in what you all want to do. Other thoughts?
This is Evan Pratt again. Just as you mentioned, the transparency, I want to let everyone know I did reach out to the department prior to this meeting, just suggesting that we might have some specific instructions in future notices and agendas for folks who are not able to participate in the meeting in this way. I think I've seen standard language before. For example, if someone needs assistance with sign language or other auditory issues, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully people don't have an objection to some instruction as to who can be contacted and what the deadline might be for that. But I just want to make sure that's out in the open.
Yep, good flag, Evan. And we've got the language that we've had on other meeting notices. It's just we missed the ball with getting it on this one. So we'll get it on, and it'll be on. It should be on the front page of the dam safety website as well. Thanks for catching that.
So Lisa, John Broszek again. So I understand the tight deadline and the logistics of getting the emails set up, but it might make sense for the officers, the chair, vice chair, and secretary, considering the secretary has to send out the approved minutes, maybe those, if we could expedite those through, so that we have that public record of official communication that's coming out from the officers on the task force.
That's a great suggestion, John. I appreciate that. Thanks. Okay, do we feel comfortable moving and voting on this today? I mean, the other option would be to go ahead and put officers in place and then revisit this when we get back together in 3 weeks, if folks want more time with this document.
Pratt will move the governance document just so we can vote on it. I don't have a problem waiting if people would like to digest another, but I'll just put it out there. Thanks. As a motion.
This is Douglas Chester. I'll second.
Discussion? Okay, well, if people feel ready, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposition? Great. All right, governance document is in front of us. All right, now let's see. Did I miss anything? I did not. Okay, great. So we are open for chair. Would anyone like to make a nomination for chair?
This is Douglas. I'd like to nominate Evan Pratt.
This is Bill Rustin. Bill Rustin, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Evan, do you accept?
I will accept. I now see what happens when you make comments early in the meeting.
Other nominations?
Move to be named by acclamation.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, well done. Well, I guess I get to hand it off then. Mr. Chair, the seat is yours.
Thank you.
Here as you need me.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, I am the type of person that just likes to get the agenda and the minutes on the table so we can vote on them early. So hopefully people will bear with me on that. So next we've got vice chair nominations up. Are there any nominations for the vice chair?
Bill Rustin, I'll nominate Douglas Chester.
Second, since Douglas is unavailable to second.
All right. Douglas, do you accept that nomination?
I do.
All right. Any other nominations? Going once? Going twice? All in favor of Doug Chester being the vice chair, just signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. I see no one wants to be secretary. Okay, Doug Chester will be our vice chair. And now we're on to, we could use a motion to nominate a secretary. Again, staff would be doing most of the work, but technically the secretary will be issuing the minutes, technically, signing off on them.
Evan, it's John Broszak. Am I allowed to nominate myself?
Okay.
I would second. This is Marty Holgren.
That was a second by Marty. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Going once? Going twice? All right, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, welcome aboard. We've got a full slate of officers for our commission. Next, we've got a presentation on the EGLE Dam Safety Program. And I see a couple of folks are going to present on here, but I think I'll hand it back to our director to introduce her staff and make the appropriate transition into these reports.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well done. Okay, so first we're going to have a presentation by Dan Devon, who is with the Dam Safety group here at EGLE. Dan's going to give us a overview. So this is going to be, some of you are going to be familiar with a lot of this, particularly we heard through some of the introductions, references to the different statutory authority that regulates the dams. But this will just get us all in one place in terms of on the same footing around the regulatory structure. So Dan has some slides he's going to present. I'd ask everybody to mute, and then you might want to take your cameras off too so we can focus on Dan. And I'm just going to remind folks that questions, you can ask Dan if he'd like you to hold them to the end, or if you'd like you to ask them during. But I would like to say that we're going to hold to just questions from task force members through both of these presentations. So with that, Dan, you are on tap.
All righty. Thank you very much, Liesl. Thanks everybody for joining the task force. Happy to see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of very qualified folks. So I will be presenting today on the dam safety program, kind of giving a quick 101. I have been with the program for just over a year now, so I think this was the department's test to see if I've learned what I need to know. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Everybody able to see my screen?
Yep, Dan, if you can just make a presentation. Yep, perfect.
Yep. Alrighty. So as Liesl mentioned, obviously, if we can keep our mics muted. If you have any questions that come up, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll try and catch those, or Liesl or others from the department, if you want to just let me know, I'll try and answer them. Also, I apologize. We actually have a little bit of work going on at our house here today, so there may be some mild background noise. If it becomes problematic, again, let me know. So starting off, overview of the dam safety program. Who are we? So the dam safety program is comprised of 3 staff, 2 of us full-time. Our supervisor, Mario Fusco, his role is split amongst a couple of different groups and responsibilities, but he is the supervisor for the hydrologic studies and dam safety unit. Luke and I are the 2 dam safety engineers. As you'll see here on the next slide, I cover the northern half of the Lower Peninsula and all of the UP, and Luke covers the lower half of the Lower Peninsula. So jumping right into the meat and potatoes here, our budget. We operate on roughly $350,000 a year, or at least last year, that was what the budget was. A portion of this comes from an MOU that we have with DNR for inspection of their dams. We also have a grant from FEMA's National Dam Safety Program, and the rest comes out of either general fund or permit fees. And the expenditures, you'll see the vast majority of that goes to staffing. So our wages, benefits, all of that stuff. And then travel and supplies, and really actually just completing our inspections takes some additional costs as well. So what do we do at the Dam Safety Program? Well, our responsibility is to administer the statutes of the Dam Safety Program, which is parts 307 and part 315 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. So our overall goal is to reduce or prevent dam failures. A dam failure is defined as an incident resulting in an unplanned or uncontrolled release of water and or material from a dam. So our authorities that we work under, first, as I mentioned, was Part 307. This is the inland lake levels component of our statute. This is the statute that covers the establishment of legal lake levels, as well as the special assessment districts that help to fund the maintenance, operation, and repair of those structures. Under this statute, we require an inspection of the dam every 3 years. That inspection is completed by a licensed engineer, a competent licensed engineer in the state of Michigan. Our program then takes those inspection reports that are provided by the owners, and we review those and provide additional comments. We do not issue permits under Part 307. However, we do work with our other resource staff and review plans and issue approval letters for projects. The other statute, Part 315, dam safety, this is where the bulk of our work comes from. This is previously known as the Dam Safety Act. This is the statute that grants us the authority to issue permits and regulate the dams. Under this statute, we mandate the inspection of the regulated dams based on their hazard classification. Excuse me. We also inspect all of our state-owned dams, and then when requested, we will inspect municipally owned dams. When we receive inspection reports from privately owned dams, we review those and provide comments back. That's a lot of our fall and wintertime work. We also work with the dam owners for high and significant hazard dams to develop and then maintain and implement emergency action plans. And when necessary, we step in and we'll take enforcement actions if dams are found to be out of compliance with Part 315 regulations. And then finally, we do issue permits under Part 315 for construction of new dams, alterations, enlargements, or removal of existing dams. So as you can see from this map, we have dams in every county of the state. That's over 2,600 structures. Of those, we have 825 that are, or approximately 825 that are regulated 315 dams, and 235 Part 307 legal lake level structures. This information is continuously being updated. We find that conditions are changing regularly that are either delisting or bumping dams up into regulation, as well as seeing removals or changes in conditions. We're currently working on updating the dams database. We're going to a web-based, GIS-based platform, as well as trying to develop some additional tools to improve our program. Recently, we had published an interactive map. There's a link here in this presentation. This can be shared. It can also be reached from the dam safety page or from the Midland and Gladwin County flooding website on the homepage of EGLE. So what is a dam? Well, in short, a dam as defined under Part 315 would be an artificial barrier that impounds 6 feet or greater in height and has an impoundment of 5 acres or more. And so that could be water, other liquids, or materials. So moving on next, the next component of what is a dam is the hazard classification. Looking at a hazard classification, we have 3 different categories. There's either high, significant, or low, and those are determined based on the downstream impacts caused by a failure of the dam. It's not necessarily an indication of the condition of the dam, but simply its risk when you're looking at what happens in the event of a failure. So as I mentioned, there's 3 hazard potential categories. High essentially means that there would be an expected loss of life and severe impacts if it were to fail. Significant dams include possible loss of life and significant impacts. And then low hazard dams, generally there's no loss of life concerns, and the impacts really are pretty minor from those. The inspection frequency, as you can see, 3, 4, or 5 years, depending on whether it's high, significant, or low. And then only the high and significant hazard dams require emergency action plans. So the emergency action plans are really critical components in managing our high and significant hazard dams. These lay out the plans and identify, who needs to be notified and who needs to be taking action during the event of an actual failure. So this work these plans are developed collaboratively with the dam owners, emergency management personnel, the dam safety program, as well as the other individuals that are listed here. Within these plans, the downstream impacts due to a failure would be identified in inundation mapping, and specifically any downstream infrastructure such as bridges or roadways that would be flooded would be identified such that those agencies and owners can respond accordingly. These plans also identify actions such as, like I said, evacuations, road closings, but also if there are immediate measures at the dam that need to be taken in the event of a failure or an impending failure. That's laid out within this plan. And these plans need to be reviewed regularly. Typically, when the dam is up for inspection, they're reviewed during that time. Additionally, it's recommended with the owners that they review them at least annually to ensure that all the contact information is up to date. So when we start looking at the inspections of the dams, these must be conducted by a licensed professional engineer. Both Luke and I are licensed in the state of Michigan. For private owned dams, they need to hire licensed engineers as well. These look at the evaluation of this dam's structural condition as well as its capacity for passing the flood flow. Based on these inspections and review of the facilities, recommendations are made in order to bring the dam into compliance if there are any identified deficiencies. And then out of this inspection, an overall condition assessment is assigned to the dam. That then gets updated within our database. And if necessary, we would follow up with the owners for ensuring that these upgrades are made. There's 5 different condition assessments that could be assigned or that we have within the database. First would be satisfactory. Ideally, this would be the goal for all of our dams in the state. So satisfactory means that there's no known or identified deficiencies and that it's performing acceptably under all loading conditions. Fair would be looking at some identified deficiencies, but it'll likely perform fine under normal loading conditions, but rare or extreme events may cause a dam safety issue. Poor would be looking at known deficiencies and risks that would come out of a risk of failure that could come out of extreme events. Unsatisfactory is that it's known that there's immediate issues that need to be taken care of with the dam. Otherwise, it's basically at risk of failure. And then we do have dams that are not rated. That's either because they've not been inspected, they're not under our jurisdiction, or for whatever reason, they just have not received a rating yet in the database. So obviously, when we look at the program, high hazard dams is one of the biggest concerns we have. We have 85 high hazard dams within the state of Michigan. Of those, none of them are in unsatisfactory condition, which is good. But there are 6 of them that are in poor condition. A few of them are in fair condition, and the vast majority of them are in satisfactory condition. And there is one that is unrated. So when deficiencies are identified, this typically comes out of inspection reports or sometimes just identification either by the owner or so occasionally from the public. There will usually be recommended actions if it's in an inspection report or through our communication with the owner, we'll come up with recommended actions that they need to perform in order to bring it back into compliance. And then we'll usually try and lay out a plan with a time frame and schedule for completing that. Let's see. If they're not responsive or they're not following the schedule or plan that was laid out, we do look to then move towards escalated enforcement so that we can try and compel them to bring the dam back into compliance. So that brings us to our escalated enforcement action. So like I said, typically we try and work with the owner first to bring him into compliance amicably. We'll initially send them a letter so that they're made aware of the fact that there is a deficiency and they're no longer in compliance. If we're not seeing action or getting a response back from the owner, we could go in a couple of different steps. One would be to issue a notice of violation, which has with that the ability to levy fines up to $10,000 per day for violating the statute. We also have the ability under Section 18 to where we can issue an order to compel the dam owner to, provide further investigations and remediate the hazardous conditions that exist at the dam. This could also include, ceasing whatever operations they have or potentially even dewatering. In Section 19, we actually is where we're issuing the order to cease operation or dewater. And if conditions are severe enough, we could order them to go so far as to remove the dam. And then kind of the final step that we would move towards if, again, we're still not seeing any action from the owner or the condition has progressed to a point where the dam is at imminent danger of failure, we could issue an emergency order where we would be compelling the owner to take immediate action to repair or draw down or breach the dam. And if they aren't able to or not willing to comply, then EGLE has the authority to step in and take those actions themselves. And then we have the ability to turn around and recoup those costs from the owner in court. So that I think actually just about covers the program. These are some additional resources that we have at our disposal that are also valuable information for this task force as we're looking at the Army Corps' National Inventory of Dams, FEMA's National Dam Safety Program, which, like I said, we get some of our funding from, a link to our website, and then ASDSO really is kind of our guiding professional organization for dam safety. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Hey, Dan. I'm echoing. Sorry, everyone. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the FERC interaction so that people have a feeling for how we work with our federal partners.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That actually wasn't really touched on in here. So FERC actually, it's really interesting in that relationship on those regulated dams because our statute explicitly states that FERC regulated dams are exempt from Part 315 regulations. So we actually do not have any regulatory authority over hydropower facilities. I apologize for that. In those instances, we have very limited involvement on those sites until such time that they are either their licenses are surrendered or their licenses get revoked, is the case with Edenville.
Not to put you on the spot, but can you do the numbers at all off the top of your head? It's in the neighborhood of 200 Michigan dams that are FERC regulated? Is that right?
I believe it's about 92, actually.
About. That sounds like the precise number.
This is, go ahead, Liesl, did you have another question?
I'm good, Bill.
Okay, I had five questions. First, you sound like you must be a duck hunter, which right after my heart. I want you to explain to me the fees real quickly. The budgets, you get about the same amount in general fund as you get in fees. Is that because that's the way the legislature has appropriated it, or why are the two numbers the same?
That's a really good question, and that's actually an aspect that I do not have as much involvement with, and being relatively new, have not delved into too much. So I'm not sure why those numbers are the same or how that was developed, but as far as the fees, I mean, it's just permit fees. Those are the only dollars that I'm aware of in terms of fees that we would receive.
So you only collect fees, just so I completely understand, you only collect fees when there's a permit application, right?
To my knowledge, I see Teresa popped up. Teresa probably has the best amount of information on this.
Sure. Hey, Bill, it's Teresa Seidel. We can provide you with the breakdown and how they work out. It isn't always an exact match like that, but it just happens to be kind of frequently that happens. And a lot of those fees come from our, not just permit fees, but some of the inspection fees from DNR. So it's kind of a balance between the two. But we'll provide you with that documentation so you can see how the program is fully funded.
Great. So
Absolutely.
you collect a fee when it's permitted, and you also collect another fee when it's inspected.
It's part, yeah, it's part of the agreement with the memorandum of understanding with DNR.
So that is the first item that was in the presentation, the MOU DNR inspection of DNR dams. That was the $112,000.
But that's only on DNR dams, right? Where you collect an inspection fee. You do or do not collect it on a privately owned dam inspection.
We do not.
You do not. So the DNR is paying for inspection, but nobody else is.
So privately owned dams have to be inspected by their own consultants. The only other instance outside of DNR dams that we provide inspections for are municipally owned dams if the municipality requests us to inspect it.
That was going to be my second question. So is there a limited jurisdiction over municipal dams? Are you limited in when you say they request it, what does that mean?
So it's just written into the statute that for municipally owned dams, we can go and provide those inspections free of charge to municipalities. We cannot do it for Part 307 legal lake level control structures because they already have a special assessment district, and so it's basically double dipping on taxes if they were to have us do those inspections, but it would just be municipally owned dams. So I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. The first one that comes to my mind actually was the last one I looked at, which was in Frankenmuth, which is now a rock ramp, still technically a dam.
That's where I grew up, yeah.
Yep. So, that one falls under a municipally owned dam that we inspect.
Okay. But do you do it on a cycle, a regular basis, or is it the municipality calls you?
It's the same cycle as all the other dams. It's based on the hazard classification. Okay. So if it's high hazard every 3 years, significant every 4, and low every 5.
So there's no difference there. Okay. Then the other question I had is the regular. So there are 2,600 dams that are regulated under your jurisdiction. How many additional dams are there out there?
No, so it's a little shy of 1,100 dams. I want to say it's like 1,065 that are regulated.
Okay.
The 2,600 is the total number of known structures in the state, and that's a moving number. That changes. We have new structures identified every year that we have to go out and inspect, or not inspect, but look at to make a determination on whether or not they're regulated.
Okay, and the regulation would be if they are 6 feet or higher. Did I understand that right?
Correct. 6 feet or higher and 5 acres or more impoundment.
And 5 acres. So anything less than that would just require an inland lakes and streams permit, right?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to understand that. All right. And then my final question is, where was the one dam that was unrated in the high hazard category?
I would have to dig into that. I don't know off the top of my head right now. I apologize.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Oh, and actually, sorry, I should probably clarify. I believe that high hazard that's unrated is a FERC dam, but I'll have to double check on that. But I'm not sure exactly where it's located.
One other question, again, on that relationship between FERC and you guys. So they regulate it. How do you, at what point do they turn the regulation over to you?
As soon as a dam has its license surrendered or revoked, then it would fall to our regulatory authority. So as soon as they are no longer allowed to produce hydropower.
So you'd have to rely on any inspections that FERC what you get a dam that they is no longer producing power. You have to rely on their assessments of the dam safety to that point, correct?
Yes. Teresa, do you want to speak to this more?
I think it would be good if you went into some of the complicating factors that happens, and that would be the Edenville scenario, right? So we inherited Edenville in 2018 after the license had been revoked, and then we had to FOIA files from FERC in order to be able to obtain the information to do the evaluation.
You had to FOIA files.
Correct.
Okay.
Because they're energy restricted, they're confidential, and we have to go through a FOIA process and sign non-disclosure agreements and go through that process. That takes a long time in order to be able to obtain those records. And that is definitely one of the pieces I think will, when you start doing your work, you'll identify that is definitely a complicating factor on these FERC regulated dams. We have another one that's happening, and you'll hear about this, Autrain in the UP, which is about to surrender their license, and it'll be a similar situation. Now, the company, the owner, can willingly provide us with those documents, but in this case, that did not happen when Edenville was revoked. They did not willingly hand us most of the documents, so we did get a few, and then we had to FOIA the rest. So it is a complicating factor.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I had one other question. Let's go back to the inspection fees real quick. Who sets the inspection fee? Is that set in statute? Do you guys do it by rule? How do you, when you go out?
Sorry, there's no actual inspection fee.
There isn't an inspection fee.
No, the fees are associated with permits. The MOU between DNR and EGLE established a cost for the inspections.
Yeah, right. We talked about this. So DNR pays an inspection fee and nobody else does.
It's an agreement, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is that fee for the DNR set by just a mutual agreement between the departments? Or is it in statute?
It's a mutual agreement between the departments. So DNR could have, they could go out and hire consultants like all of the other non-municipal dam owners and pay a consultant to do that work. But instead we have an agreement, and so the dam safety program performs that work for them.
Okay.
All right, I saw a lot of hands up. I think Evans was first.
Oh, sure. I don't know if this is a question for right now, maybe a little bit too much of a rabbit hole to get into, and I suspect we'll have a number of rabbit holes on the way where we might have to say, this is something we're going to handle later. But just a flag, I did mention, I have background in rain. I'd like to be able to make sure that to get the whole committee on the same page, as well as communicating to the public, it is a little confusing to talk about design storms, the amount of rain that comes in a design storm, and the idea that whether it's really soggy out or it's a dry day in August has a big impact on how much of that rain ends up in a river or so forth. So I think it might help our committee to all get on the same playing field with that type of information about what the design storm event is, what the design flow event is, how those may or may not be related, as well as to talk about the different there have been 3 different sort of rainfall analyses over time. And the only conclusion I draw out of those 3 different analyses is that the storms keep getting bigger as far as return frequency. So getting into not only the 100-year or 500-year, but also clarifying the time period that's over, being able to clarify what's the difference if it rains for a week beforehand versus it's been, super dry for a week. All those kind of things I think are going to be helpful to us, but I don't know that it's productive right now for getting an overview to all of that. I just bring those things up, though, is the way I try to communicate to my constituents when they come to our office about a problem much smaller than this, but nonetheless, we're a special assessment unit. They end up paying money. I try to relate these things to an insurance policy. So I'm also going to be curious to find out if there's a way to estimate during the course of this study, well, what would it take to replace at least the regulated structures? Because I see $300,000 is essentially the annual premium for what's more or less a statewide insurance policy. Off the cuff, that seems a little light, even though I don't really have a good grasp on what the replacement value would be of all of those facilities. I'm sure it's a much bigger number than any of us could come up with without a little, GoFundMe page or some such. So more of a statement than a question, but something that I'd like to make sure that we all get on the same page with, and I'm sure there will be a little bit of information on that today, but just one thought. And if people do have other thoughts too, questions or comments about this, I think if I understand it right, EGLE's going to kind of have a point of contact for us to sort of get all of our questions into. I have stuff pop into my head at night or what have you. I don't always think of it when we're in the middle of something like this. So just offering that to folks. And go ahead and keep traffic copying, Liesl, since this is kind of the EGLE portion.
Sounds good. Okay, so I think I saw John next.
Hi, Dan. Hey, just a couple of questions because I'm still learning a bit about the state regulatory structure. So of those dams that are in the poor category, is there an active action or remediation plan that gets them back into a higher level of classification? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So yes, we have been tracking those. We do have, we'll say at this point, kind of a tentative overall compliance plan. We're working on coming up with a broader statewide risk portfolio and then targeting our efforts based on that. But we do communicate regularly with those owners, and I would say, sadly, up to this point, our ability to push for compliance is certainly metered by our staffing availability. There's 2 of us, and it's been a busy year already. So, we certainly are pushing for that. We're working on more concrete plans, and certainly as we've got a position opening right now that we're trying to fill. So as more resources become available, we'll be able to put more focus towards compliance action, which is what we should be moving towards.
Okay, great. And then you may have covered it, and I might have just missed it, but of the 685-ish dams that are in the safety classification, what is the funding model for those owners to be able to operate, maintain, remediate any kind of a safety issue that might occur with those dams? Because if I've learned anything in my role working particularly with river hydros, is that it's a very dynamic situation. And you may get inspected every 3 years, but part of our owner dam safety program regulated by the FERC, we do daily, weekly, monthly, annual inspections, and there's always some dynamic aspect of that, whether it's an embankment or some type of just erosion that occurs due to the flow of the water. But what actually allows those private entities to fund their operation to address safety?
That's a great question. So that's above and beyond what our program does itself. That's probably one of the biggest deficiencies that we have out there right now is funding. It's the responsibility of these owners to maintain their dams. There are very limited grant funding opportunities for repairs and maintenance of the dams. And, you know, as those come available, and particularly as issues arise that you know, rise up that risk profile that we have for our state's dams, you know, we try and work with those owners on achieving grant opportunities. But like I said, it's very limited what funding there is out there outside of their own dollars.
Okay, so I think that's a fundamental question that we have to answer, is what are recommendations to to address that recognized gap. In terms of that, and I'm stating the obvious here, obviously that transition phase between when FERC may either terminate a license, or if you get some heads up of an entity that's going to potentially surrender their license, that transfer of information is just obviously critical. So those that have been directly involved, know that, and there should be free and ready access to that information, probably in advance, so that you know what you're going to be accepting. Because to me, it's unacceptable that a license is terminated, because these things don't typically happen overnight. It's usually evolving over several years. That there should be some advance notice of that information. So just for the record, that's another issue I think the task force needs to figure out in our relationship with FERC, how to address that. And I can just state from doing the inspections and the findings. So we have self-reports, and then we have findings that the FERC inspections identify. It's a constant negotiation of assessing the risk significance of those and agreeing on a reasonable time frame to address those issues. And so, again, just stressing, it concerns me that we have some in a poor category. I think most owners will want to address any gaps or deficiencies, assuming they have adequate funding to go do it. And as we're learning from incorporation of lessons learned from Oroville and the increased requirements that we're seeing on the federal level, it's not insignificant amounts of funds to address some of these issues. Abby knows what we're planning to do with respect to the Hardy Pond, and it's a very major effort we're looking at there on the Hardy Dam. But I'm stating some obvious that the task force members probably most are aware of already. But obviously, risk and those in the highest safety category really need to be the focus of our efforts, I believe, and to make sure that we quickly close any gaps we have there. Because I'll call them bad actors, or those that for whatever reason cannot or will not address gaps or deficiencies. That has to be the primary focus. We had a major flood in 1986 on the Hardy Pond, and those things come up on you very, very quickly. As Evans commented on, the increases we're seeing in rainflow and rainfall. We have to make sure there's proactive action when deficiencies are identified, because the longer that drags out, the longer that risk exists. And it can happen in a very short period of time, as we've seen with recent events in the state. So I know I'm stating the obvious to many folks, but just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Good addition, John. Next, I think I saw Douglas's hand up, and Dana's hand went up, but then Dana's hand went down. So we'll go to Douglas next.
Sure, thank you. Dan, thanks for the presentation. I just have a couple of follow-up questions. One thing, I'm going to read this out for those who aren't familiar with it. Article 7, Section 12 of Michigan's 1963 Constitution is a provision that says a navigable stream shall not be bridged or dammed without permission granted by the Board of Supervisors of the county as provided by law. And it goes on with some additional provisions. But what's the status of the implementation of that provision in Michigan's Constitution, and how does that interact with the program in the Dam Safety Office?
I may have to phone a friend here or somebody with more experience. I'm going to ask the question, have there been any new dams since then?
Luke.
You
were saying earlier that the list is dynamic, that there are.
So let me clarify on that. So when I say the list is dynamic, it's not that new structures are going in, it's that we're being notified of existing structures that haven't previously been inventoried. So, last year I was over in the northeast corner of the Lower Peninsula looking at a small dam, that had been in place for 30 years or more, that just never had made the inventory. It didn't qualify as a regulated dam, but it was a small structure, and so therefore we wanted to make sure we inventoried it.
Yeah. So the balance of that section says which permission shall be subject to such reasonable compensation and other conditions as may seem best suited to safeguard the rights and interests of the county and political subdivisions thereof. And it sounds to me like there's really no cross-referencing. Your office is not aware of any conditions that may exist for or be imposed on the dams that you're inspecting by the county. Is that correct?
So Douglas, this is Luke Trumbull. To answer your question, I'm not a lawyer. I'll have to caveat first, but you're right. In 1963 or so, the authority to grant dam construction permits fell to the counties, per the article you just read. I don't know exactly how it works, but in 1978, there was a subsequent law passed that gave the department, was DNR at that point, but what became DEQ, the authority to issue permits for construction of dam. And to answer Dan's question, there has been constructions of dams since 1963. Not a whole lot. We stopped. I think that was about the time that we as a society kind of started to slow down on dam construction. But then that 1978 Dam Construction Act was superseded by the Dam Safety Act in 1989, which later became Part 315 Dam Safety of the Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act. So I believe through those processes, the authority to grant permits for construction of a dam transferred from the counties to the state. I don't know the full history, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say for sure that there isn't some authority still with the county, but that's my understanding.
Okay.
So I hope that's the question. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And then I don't expect that you have a statistical answer to my question. I'm really looking for something qualitative. But if you look at the dams that you do regulate, some of them fall under assessment districts, like lake level control assessment districts. Some are no doubt just privately owned by a single entity. And then there are some that are publicly owned, municipal dams, state dams and the like. And I'm imagining there's some category that is more ambiguous than all of that, where there either isn't a clear-cut owner or it's some kind of an association that is not constituted as a lake level control district. How common is that sort of ambiguous responsibility?
I'd say that it's not horribly uncommon. We do see that on from time to time. There's a number of lakes that or lake associations that I've worked with already that do not have legal lake levels established. So they're not 307 structures, but there is a structure in place, and so you're working with the association on those, but ultimately it really comes down to who, I believe, and Luke can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it really comes down to who has ownership of the property of the dam is where that responsibility is ultimately going to fall. Barring other, legal documents establishing some other delegated authority, it's basically to whoever owns the property. Luke, did you have any other feedback on that?
That's pretty much it. Part 315 does have a broader definition of dam owner to include folks who operate or are responsible for dams. But you're right. Typically, there's a dam owner, a property owner who owns the dam, or several property owners. If you understand how the properties are split, they usually go to the center of the stream, and that might be 4, 5, 6 different parcels that a dam sits on or more. So it can get tricky. Typically, you know, somebody has identified themselves as the property owner / dam owner, and those are the folks that we deal with directly for compliance or just regulatory communication. So unless there's an issue, you know, where somebody's disputing ownership, then we can go back through the title searches and see how the dam transferred with what properties and establish who owns the properties, and if there are any of those legal agreements that Dan talked about for operation and maintenance of the dam, who might, you know, suggest that somebody else is responsible for upkeep. So, but I'd say it's frequent enough that it happens, but it's probably a small minority that we don't have an established dam owner who we know is responsible for the dam.
So again, not expecting you to have a statistical answer, but just broadly, if you were to look at those you understand to be dam owners, how many of them are likely to have the financial means to do proper maintenance and or you know, major event response should that need arise?
That's a tough question there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know what I can tell you. I can tell you none of them are really excited when we tell them they have to do more work.
We're definitely hitting on some similar themes here, so I think this is really helpful.
I would add that a lot of the dams, for the most part, the dams are in that fair and satisfactory category, condition-wise. So I would say the majority of the dam owners are doing a fairly good job of keeping the dams maintained properly. But you know, what happens when the dam reaches the end of its design life and you're talking about $1 million project or a multi-million-dollar project? That's the question that we want to ask and answer, is what's in place for that one property owner or that lake association who does pretty good putting, you know, tens of thousands of dollars into a dam, but what if it becomes millions or tens of millions? So yeah, I agree. That's a topic we need to cover.
Yeah, that's really where I was going to. So, okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to keep moving. I didn't see any other hands up. I know we're getting a little behind on the agenda, but I think that this conversation is helping to pull out the threads of the themes that we need to discuss in the future. So I'm not going to worry too much. I see Evan nodding, so I think we're in agreement. Okay, next, Luke, if you would like to take it away. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Thank you for letting us grill you. We look forward to you coming back and sharing more insights in the future. But thank you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Luke Trumbull, who's now going to talk a bit about ASDSO, the Association of State Dam Safety Officials, and how they view their program reviews and the type of interaction that we've been having so far. So with that, I'll hand it off to Luke.
Great, thanks, Liesl. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, if you can just go to pull, yeah, there you go.
All right, that's the right one. You see the presenter view, or okay?
Almost. It's not quite there yet. Did you do the?
I did. Is that better?
No, we don't have the full presenter yet. It's still in the review format.
Oh, okay, hold on. Let me. It's because I've got multiple screens. I'm sorry. Let me try this again. Let's do. Sometimes you have to share your screen, not your.
Yeah, I did it wrong earlier too, so I should. You can call me later and fill me in on how to do it right.
All right, is that correct?
Yes, looking good.
Okay. Sorry. Oops. So, I'm gonna try to get us back on track a little bit as far as time goes, but I wanted to give a brief overview of the ASDSO peer review program, which the State of Michigan Dam Safety Program just contracted with ASDSO to perform in August. So a little bit of background. When I say ASDSO, that's an acronym for Association of State Dam Safety Officials. Its association was founded in 1983. Currently, there are over 3,000 members from local, state, federal governments, academia, dam owners, consultants, and many, many other students and other groups of folks. And this is from their website, which is linked at the bottom. Their mission is to improve the condition and safety of dams through education, support for state dam safety programs, and fostering a unified dam safety community. What that means is their goals, or their overall goals, that kind of have fallen into these themes: support of the state dam safety programs, develop ways to engage the community, advance and expand the technical expertise of dam and levee safety, promote innovative approaches to funding dam rehabilitation at the state and federal level, increase public awareness around dams, advocate when necessary for laws and policies governing dam safety to reduce risk, and strengthen and support coordinated effort to improve the safety of levees. As a subset of ASDSO, there's what's called a peer review program, and the objective was to provide professional guidance, and I'm just going to paraphrase, to improve the performance of dam safety programs. So in doing so, they take a look at the mission, objective, policies, laws, the organizational structures, the governing regulations, and see how it fits with the FEMA Model Dam Safety Program. And there's a link to the bottom for more information on the ASDSO peer review program. So just some background history on the program. The peer review program was established in 1989 as a resource for state dam safety programs, and it was a cooperative effort between ASDSO, the ICODS, or the Federal and Interagency Committee on Dam Safety, and the American Society of Civil Engineers. And they developed the manual. So they wrote the book about dam safety peer review. And this is just a snapshot of the cover. And over the years since 1989, they've completed 49 peer reviews of state dam safety programs, which includes Michigan in 2006. And again, we're wrapping that up now into 2020. They've completed 4 peer reviews of private dam safety programs. So it is the service has been expanded from beyond state government or state programs to dam owner dam safety programs and also federal agencies. And they've completed 18 reviews of federal dam safety programs. There's a pool, there's a standing committee with a pool of 24 dam safety experts. Usually a team of 3 to 4 get assigned when somebody requests a dam safety program review. And they try to get a kind of a mix of a state or federal regulator, a consultant, and a dam owner. And then this slide shows the team that was assigned to Michigan, and they're fairly local from Illinois, Indiana, and Pennsylvania. But the team lead is Bob Dalton, who was the former state of Illinois dam safety program lead, and now he works in consulting. Then the team members are Bill Bingham, who is a retired consultant for Gannett Fleming, Ken Smith, who is the assistant director of the Division of Water of Indiana, which heads up the dam safety program in Indiana, and Denny Dickey, who is a consultant who used to be the head of Pennsylvania's dam safety program. And this was something they told us the other day, that they had over 100 between the 4 of them, they have over 140 years of combined dam safety experience. So these guys are all 30, 40 plus year veterans of dam safety. So what have they done so far? The first part of when we request the review is that they start requesting documentation, which is some of the stuff that Doug had talked about earlier, was the previous statutes, the current statutes, and some of the other statutory authorities for emergency powers of the state. And then they look at the organization structure, and then we also provided a couple other reports on infrastructure that were done recently, as well as the 2006 ASDSO peer review report for Michigan, which was the last time we requested this review. So in addition, they've looked at emergency action plans, inspection reports, typical communications, good and bad examples, compliance correspondence, things like that, related to dams recently. In addition to reviewing a lot of these documents, they've also completed virtual interviews. We had started to plan to do some of this in person, but the decision with COVID and travel restrictions and just people's comfortability level was to go fully virtual. So as far as I know, this is the first virtual peer review of a dam safety program completed by ASDSO, but they interviewed several folks from Water Resources Division, the dam safety staff, our admin section, EGLE's emergency management coordinator, and one county emergency management coordinator who was also involved with the recent dam failure in Midland and Gladwin counties. So with that, they provided preliminary oral report of findings and recommendation to EGLE in August, and they just on Friday submitted a draft final report. So the next steps would be to finalize the review team will finalize the written report and hopefully in September, and we're hoping to have it available ahead of the next dam safety task force meeting, which I believe is October 1st, so that the folks on the task force can review the final report, and kind of use that as a springboard to jumpstart some of these conversations that we talked about earlier, and all the other aspects of the review. So we're also twisting their arm a little bit to be on hand for the next meeting, either the October 1st or potentially the October 21st meeting, to present on their findings and be on hand for that meeting to answer any questions that the group might have from that review, and maybe even into the future if we have questions that come up or need to correspond with the group to expand on some of the topics covered in the review. That's it on the ASDSO peer review.
So hopefully you can see from Luke's overview why we thought it was really important to have ASDSO come in, do a review of the program, to, kind of give us that grounding and those conversations for next steps. So as Luke said, we are looking forward to bringing them in to talk through their findings and be able to answer your questions and have a more kind of public conversation about what they found. So that is upcoming. All right, I see John has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear the results of the peer review. Were there findings that came out of the 2006 review, or will this task force be able to see the findings that came out of the 2006 peer review and how those were dispositioned?
Sure, I think that's the intention here is to give that report. Keep in mind that was done at a different time, 14 years ago, and it was there's a long history, but it was following a shutdown of the program from late 2005 to 2006. So, but yeah, that was kind of the first step in this whole process, was to take the 2006 findings, build upon that, a current snapshot in 2020, and then turn it over to this group to expand and look, at everything that dam safety touches and try to figure out what we can be doing better.
So their review this time is really picking up where the 2006 review left off, kind of assessing what's happened in the last 14 years and then giving us a current day assessment?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We'll make that available. So we'll figure out if it makes sense just to post everything on it probably just makes sense to post everything on the Dam Safety Task Force website, because then it's available publicly at the same time. So we'll work through those details. Sorry, we didn't have those all ironed out before today. We'll work through those details and be in correspondence over email, but we'll get that to you all. Other questions for Luke about ASDSO? I know this is really just a teaser for when their report is finalized, and then you'll have a chance to, have a real discursive conversation with them as well. Luke, you caught us back up. Well done, sir. Thank you, Luke. Appreciate it. Okay. With that, I think I'm handing it back to the chair.
Okay, thanks very much. And thanks again for the helpful staff presentations. I feel like we're kind of all getting up to the same playing level with some of the information here. And I noted in the chat that I kind of had the same question as John, just to get an understanding of how 06 and 2020 reports by those folks do relate to each other. So next, I think we're on to future agenda focus areas, just general discussion and all of that. And I guess my experience with the Zoom things is it is fine at times to throw things out there for general comment, but that does give the extroverts a little bit of a leg up. So I'm going to walk through the alphabetical list again and just call people out. And I think if you've got an area that you'd like us to dive into in the future, just maybe a couple of words on it. If it's something that requires some explanation, we can probably catch up with that in the future on staff. Also, if you feel like there's a question that pops into your head while you're waiting your turn, I think it's okay to get a question out there. We may or may not have the time to answer everything today, but at least to get out there. We do want to make sure we have time for public comment as well here. So I imagine we're going to go a little bit over, if not a fair amount over. That said, though, I'm going to run down the list and just see if people have agenda items they'd like for future, so we can plan appropriately for the future agendas. So Paul Ajaba, you're first on the list. Anything you want to know from the MDOT side of things, or?
No, I'm just absorbing everything that's been presented today. Some of my questions I think will come at later meetings. The issue of how these private dam owners get funding to help defray the cost of inspection and keeping that safe, I think it's a big issue that this task force will have to address. Because I would imagine it's more profit before safety that we're seeing right now, and that's a major concern for me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Evan.
Yes, no, that's an excellent point. Mindy, I've got you next on the list. Do you have any areas that you're going to want to see us delve into or structure?
I'm kind of with Paul, kind of keeping and listening and learning, and it's very interesting. I was kind of interested in the past. I understood in the past that the EGLE, I always want to call you guys a DEQ, sorry, wants to or only regulates so many of the dams. And then it's very interesting learning about the FERC part of it and the private dam owners and how, because I know a lot of them just don't have the money, or they don't want to put the money into it that is theirs. So we'll have to figure that aspect out, because I'm kind of looking at the whole picture and how it relates to, it's not just when a dam fails, all the homeowners, they lose everything in the lake, but then look at how many millions of dollars of roads, bridges, and other structures that were lost as well. So it's a big picture, a lot more than what people realize, I think. So thanks.
Absolutely. A dam failure usually is a systemic thing, not just there's one broken dam. There's a lot of things that I think we see in the early reports. There's quite a few road crossings and such that are in trouble. John Brochak, any comments from you?
Yeah, I apologize for being in that extrovert category. I've got a lot of thoughts on the topic, obviously. I think that issue of ownership and accountable authority is very important for us. If we don't have a clear owner, or there's ambiguity on who owns responsibility for the dam, that's a huge red flag for me. And I didn't cover my background because I didn't think it was too relevant, but I spent about 25 years in both naval and commercial nuclear. And so that issue of risk, accountable authority, escalation processes, I'm very familiar with how that's dealt with on both the state and federal level. But I think that ownership and even the financial viability of, once you have clear ownership of understanding what the financial capability, whether they have it or not, to address issues is something that needs to be made more visible. So I'd be interested in our thoughts, collective thoughts around that. And then really the other one is this whole escalation process, because when a deficiency is identified, not only how quickly does that get escalated, but what are the interim safety measures that you take to protect the communities that are affected? And are we real clear on our authority and ability? Because the societal problem we're wrestling with here is that you can't just walk away from these dams. You can't just throw your hands up and say, well, I don't have the financial resources. I don't care anymore, so I'm going to abdicate my responsibility, because rivers are relentless. They never stop. And so, whereas a bridge, we can stop people from driving over the bridge. There's other things we can do with infrastructure problems to protect safety. Rivers are a very unique animal. And so that understanding of assessment of risk, escalation process, and then what do we do on the far ends of that when you have an accountable authority that just says, hey, I'm done in this game. You're not done. And how do we wrestle with that? Because I think we can really be a model for the nation here in addressing this very thorny societal problem. And so I definitely want us to spend adequate time on escalation, and then because the bedmark of the owner's dam safety programs is that safety trumps everything, and we have to make sure that we've got within the state regulatory framework the agreed philosophy that how do we make sure safety trumps everything, given that at the end of the day there's a financial component to this, and we need to be able to enforce the public safety. So thank you, Evan.
Yeah, it sounds like a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I have to agree. A mentor taught me years ago that responsibility and authority must be inextricably intertwined. You have to have those two in harmony, and I think you've given a little bit of a spoiler alert as to what a good chunk of our charge is. How do we decide that? Lisa, I assume you've had an opportunity to provide input on direction, so I'll move to Dan from DNR.
Thank you, Evan. I'm all set for now, but I appreciate the great presentations from EGLE staff.
Yep. Brent Fessel, from a tribal perspective, any comments, questions?
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Brett, sorry.
Or Evan. Yeah, just a couple of things. I'll keep it brief. But first, I'd like to express my gratitude, and I think I could speak for everybody's, but for Dan and Luke and the program and dealing with what they dealt with on this whole thing. I mean, this was quite an emotional and a whole series of other matters and dealing with this, and they're in the front line dealing with that. So I appreciate that greatly. I also appreciate Dan's background on his virtual presentation. I enjoy that. The removal at Sabin, I believe. Lastly, it's just a question generally in terms, I guess it gets to this, the complicating factors with FERC and this transition period from FERC to the state ownership and those responsibilities. Is there any intent to have, or any value in having any FERC representatives involved in these conversations, if for no other reason, just to help us better understand the underpinnings of these complications? These are things that I feel like can be avoided with simple communication and changes in policy or protocols. And yeah, I'm just curious about that. So thank you.
Great, good comment. Dr. Holgren, Marty, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. One thing I'd like to explore a little more, we had a discussion, John mentioned that public safety, trumps all, and I think we'd all agree with that. And it's that interconnectedness also with the public trust, and those times when a dam removal may be appropriate. And during Luke's presentation, he talked about the mission of ASDSO, and I did notice on that mission it had maintaining and rehabilitating dams. In some situations, the best practice may actually be a strategic removal of those dams for public safety and for improving the ecology of downstream systems, et cetera. So I'll be interested in exploring kind of those interconnections that we have between public safety and then the public trust and natural resources.
Makes sense. Another good topic. I see we've got a lot of breadth and depth to our experiences. I love hearing a lot of different lenses that people are looking through to make sure we're thorough. Dr. Infante, Dana, did you have a comment, question, a goal?
Yeah, and Evan, this actually builds on some of the points you were making earlier when you were talking about changes in flow. I mean, one question that I'm wondering is whether or not the dam layer is tied to a hydrography layer and which that might be. And I'm wondering if when hazard is being considered, if it's being considered with a dam in sequence with other dams, sort of a network-wide evaluation. And I'm just wondering if these are some of the ideas that we can maybe talk about later on.
Yeah, that's a great point. We hear about like the Mississippi River Basin, and I've always said I would hate to be that person who has to make the decision to flood a bunch of farmland in order to prevent other floods, but they make that decision because there is a pretty sophisticated model, and I'm guessing we may not be quite there in Michigan, but we'll learn more about that. Great point. Doug Jester, do you have other questions, comments, or desired outcomes?
I've spoken a lot, so I'll be fairly brief. The issue that Evan raised about understanding where flows are going is something I'm definitely interested in, and I think John Broszak's comments are all very much on point. I think we would all benefit if there is a way to get at it, to get a further understanding of the dams that we have. The information provided today, which was terrific, sort of gives us the legal status, but I think it would be helpful to understand, for let's say the high hazard dams, what the costs would be for maintaining and or removing them. What is the nature of the hazard, things of that kind, and then looking more broadly at dams. Why do they exist now? What is the value that someone in society is getting from them? We have the obvious hydropower dams, but then, there are other reasons. And I doubt that we have a particularly good picture of the motives behind the dam owners maintaining them. I think understanding that helps us get at what kinds of rules or practices we need.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jim Kochevar?
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Probably not a lot new to add, but I'm aligned topically with everything that we've talked about before. I think it was John early on that mentioned the escalation process. I think that that's important to understand how we're both reviewing inspections and enforcing deficiencies. I think that also goes hand in hand with a review of staffing and funding of the state dam program. Seems to be a bit light shoestring, given the volume of work there and the number of dams. So look forward to those conversations going forward. Obviously, the handoff or inherited dam circumstance needs to be discussed and reviewed. I suspect that there are not an awful lot of pristine dams that are handed off to the state. So, there's a significant risk in that. Very much looking forward to review of the peer review. I trust that will give a significant boost to the work that we're doing. And then again, repeating, but the funding for private dams. Again, we manage 14 dams. We are an investor-owned, for-profit company. If we want to stay in business, we have to first live up to our core values of environmental stewardship and safety. And we can account for these projects, even large capital projects, in our business plans going forward. I suspect it's very few that have the capability of doing that. So there's probably a financial gap in ensuring the safety of many of these facilities. So I think topically, that will be a part of our discussion going forward as well.
Yeah, thanks. Those are 3 or 4 good bullets to have in there, especially the reemphasis. And I appreciate you mentioning the word handoff too. I'm not a big football fan. For me, Saturday's a rugby day, and I'm not an Ann Arbor native, although I live there. But Bo Schembechler, one of his famous quotes among many, when asked by a reporter about whether he was nervous on game day, it was, well, if you had a 19-year-old running around with your job in his hands every weekend, you might be a little nervous too, something to that effect. So point being that handoffs are always points that you want to take a very strong look at, because that's a point of weakness, point of failure. And I really appreciate the emphasis that folks have had on that FERC handoff process, as well as, you know, anything else like related to ownership. We had a local situation a few years ago, and although our road commission had dutifully performed dam inspections and behaved like an owner, when it came time for replacement, you know, they were obligated to point out that they were not really the legal owner, and you know, there was a lot of stepping back before there was a solution found, and that solution was wholly rooted in being able to identify a funding source. People were a lot more willing to take partial ownership if there were funds in order to. This was a dam removal situation, so those are all very practical things to be bringing up here. Paul Maloka, we've got you next.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. A few things. I want to dovetail on what John Broszek was talking about and others about risk. And I think, you know, we want owners who don't simply react to dam safety inspections as their safety program. And I think a big part of that is making sure the owner is acquainted with and accepts the risk. And so I guess that's a question I have. Is there some way to put, you know, in there where the highest level of fiscal authority in that organization, in that company, whatever, is affirming that they understand the risk and are accepting it? And then that's a way to start flagging where there's a mismatch, right, between the risk that actually is there and what the owner is capable of covering. So that's one thing. And another one, Marty Holgren mentioned about dam removals, and I think that's an important piece of this, right, is to try to thin the inventory out of the dams that nobody wants and are just bogging down bogging down the regulatory work that's done over at EGLE, and streamlining that dam removal process. You know, there's a whole host of different regulatory concerns that have to be brought together when you're trying to do a dam removal. You've got fish, you've got wetlands, you have sediment, dredging, sediment release, sediment disposal. 3 different regulatory regimes, floodplain, and all those things. Somehow to streamline that process a little bit, if there's a way to do that. And then I guess the final comment would be related to the dam regulation itself. Is the same comment really applies, is that there are sundry different regulatory regimes that apply to dam safety in effect, you know, even though the dam safety governs all that. And I think some internal hierarchy of those different regulatory regimes in view of dam safety. Is there a way to talk about that, to improve that? And they do a good job at it, and I think it's just something maybe has to start appearing. Something in the statute may need to happen there, you know. So that's what I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, good comments. All right, Tanya, did you have any comments or questions or general statements?
I don't have anything to add right now. Many, obviously, fantastic ideas and a lot of work to do. So appreciate the presentations today and continuing to put these pieces together.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just take my turn in order of the alphabet here. So I guess I'm going to be sitting in class next to Tanya for the next few months here. Just one other comment. I've added a few items or clarifications of how I'm understanding what people are saying, but the high end, I understand our charge is to basically take a look at the current situation, be able to write that down. I understand we'll have a consultant on board soon to assist us with that, to translate our thoughts and words, kind of like we're doing here. I'm sure they'll have fun watching this tape, but to also spend time talking about the future situation. I really appreciate some people already laying out visions for the future. I imagine one of the difficult parts will be that third step in that process, which is, well, how do we get there? How do we have a report that can function as a high-level roadmap for getting to that future state we lay out? So that's not next meeting, but that's going to be coming up before we know it as we get into January, the how do we get there part. So that's what I'm looking to accomplish out of all this. I've got Bill Rustum on the list next.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today. Just a few things. I think Douglas raises an interesting question, and it relates to the $74,000 that the department collected in permit fees. And I just want to understand where those came from. Are those new dams? Are they? I don't know if Liesl or somebody, Dan, can answer that question.
Bill, help me understand. You're asking, where do the dam fees come from under Part 315 or 307?
315. I understood. Was that just 307?
Under 315. So there's no
under 315.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Dan.
So that would be Part 315 fees, and that would be associated with major repairs, modifications, things like that. I know Cleveland Cliffs certainly contributed quite a bit. Luke can probably speak a little bit to it. Otherwise, I think as Teresa Seidel had mentioned, she'll be able to get a little bit more detail on those numbers to you.
That'd be helpful. Just to understand what our existing, where the money's coming from. And Douglas raised an interesting question about what the county's role is in new dams versus the Inland Lakes and Streams Act versus. I just need to understand the legal roles of everybody in a new dam. I'm not talking about existing dams or new permits. Do you issue a new permit every time you do a fix?
Yes. So generally we do require permits for any repairs. There are certain maintenance activities that do not require permits. Swapping out stop logs, things like that, assuming that it's not impacting water levels. Some of the concrete patchwork, things like that, doesn't require permit. But when they're looking at modifications that are going to impact the structural stability of the dam, that certainly requires a permit. There's certain characteristics of work that can fall under a minor permit versus a full-fledged individual permit. Okay,
and then the other issues, I'm with Marty as well on the question of the dams that are out there that you guys don't regulate, and it's a question in my mind of reconnecting streams in many instances. You have a natural barrier to biological genetic movement along streams, and as Marty's pointed out, a lot of these dams, I don't know why they're there. Nobody can explain why they're there, and in many cases, you don't know who the hell owns them. So they're out there. Those, in addition to those that the state regulates, and I'd like to cover those. And then we've got to figure out a way that we get into the lifetime costs of these things. We've done it with reclamation. We have a Sand Dune Minings Act that requires people to say what they're going to do at the end of the day. We have sand and gravel mining has to explain what they're going to do at the end of the day. We don't have it in hard rock mining's got to explain what they do at the end of the day. We don't have it in dam. What's the plan for assuring that it is maintained or there are dollars there to remove it once the thing is over? So how you deal with that is going to be a challenge for us.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Anything else, Bill, or did that cover it?
That covers it.
For now. I mentioned in the chat I somehow missed Brian Burrows, so I'd like to just zoom back to Brian and call on him. Before he starts, though, I'll just mention that we're 3 or 4 people away from getting through the committee. We'll be moving to public comment soon. So if you are on the meeting and you're a member of the public and you are interested in commenting, you can either raise your hand in the chat or I'll need a reminder of what folks on the phone can do. I can't remember if I've got to just go down the list and mention phone numbers, but I'll either be calling out specific phone numbers for comment or I'll be getting a hand from staff on if there's a function they can use to virtually raise their hand. I don't know if that's if there's another star or something or other. But Brian Burrows, if you'd like to add any comments, then we'll have 3 or 4 more people and then on to, I believe, public comment. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll try to be brief. I think a lot of my, great interest areas have been mentioned. And for as far as future agendas, how to break everything up, we have to talk about everything, basically statutes, legislation, legislative needs, the enforcement, the program funding, and then, this question about who will pay and how we make sure people pay for either for removal. So, how to break all of those up, they're all going to be things we have to talk about. So I would just echo, obviously, my unique point of view from my organization is that this is mostly, I think what Bill just got done saying is, to build a dam, you got a permit a really long time ago. And once you got it, now you're good to go. From a state perspective, and you can continue having it more or less as long as you keep it safe. But with the FERC ones, the law has changed, and even with a 40-year license, you now have to kind of reconcile the environmental impact that you have, and you have to mitigate for it. And all of the other non-FERC ones are just sort of grandfathered in, and there's a lot of them. So kind of tackling this question of the long-term disposition of the dams is really critical, and tough conversations about who bears the responsibility for different decisions versus who gets the benefits will be pretty important. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about all of those, and I love the thoughts coming from everybody so far.
Yeah, I think my head's starting to spin a little bit here. It's quite a lot. Dan Scripps, do you have anything you'd like to make sure that we talk about?
Yeah, I think a lot of mine have also been covered, but we want to echo Brett and Jim's point on having FERC come in and talk about the process. I think that's an area that clearly could be improved. They also have a notice of proposed rulemaking process currently on dam safety. And I think having them, some staff from FERC, talk about what they're looking at, what they've heard, comments are due on that later this month, could be useful just in terms of understanding how FERC is trying to improve its processes. We, after the failure of the Edenville and Sanford dams, had a number of the companies that we regulate come in and talk about their dam safety protocols. You could spend a lot of time. Obviously, we're not going to do that for all, several thousand dams, but it might be useful to have one or more of them come in and just talk about how they evaluate their sort of dam safety issues, and from an operator's perspective. I also think that having somebody, we're one of 50 states, we probably can always learn from some of our peers, and I don't know if it's the Association of State Dam Safety Officials or others, but to provide not like a 50-state overview, but maybe some examples of best practices or how other states have addressed these issues when they've come up. California's obviously had some dam failure issues, and California is never my favorite state to look to in terms of examples, but looking at others who may have had these issues and had to wrestle with them and how they approach the issues. And then finally, I agree with Bill. There's an awful lot, I think, in other industries around decommissioning that we might want to look at. We have it in obviously the power sector in terms of a number of the issues connected with the retirement of old plants and who bears the costs and the like. And but to look across other sectors at decommissioning issues and whether there are lessons learned there that might apply to the dam context might also be informative.
All right. Great, thanks very much. next, Dr. Stan Vitton.
Baton.
Sorry about that. I wrote down the pronunciation for as many as I did, and I already butchered Jim's.
That's fine. I'll make this really quick. You know, I mentioned in the beginning, you know, my father built a dam for his farm in 1958, and we owned it up until a few years ago. My cousin owns it now. I look at this dam. He doesn't have a lot of money. It's a beautiful dam, 250 acres, something like that. A beautiful ecosystem. It performed beautifully through a 1,000-year event as a flood retention structure. It put a lot of water in it, and anyway, it's a really nice place. And so I look at my cousin and I said, "What should we do?" Well, let's decommission it. Let's take it out of there. When I look at the impacts of what we're going to do by decommissioning that to my cousin, as a small example, it's quite horrendous. And I'm just saying that's one thing that needs to be looked at. We look at small private owners of small dams that were originally constructed primarily for farms. And I will also point out that 1963 County Act was actually due to Houghton County, with farmers arguing and fighting amongst each other about who was stealing water. So there's a lot of history, which brings me to the last point. For example, the Red Ridge Dam, which is 120-year-old, also acted as a flood retention structure during our 1,000-year event, preventing the destruction of a road. It also prevents sea lamprey from going up the Salmon Trout River. It's got a lot of points, but yet it's owned by a township who doesn't really want it. So I shouldn't say doesn't want it, but at least doesn't have the money to maintain it. So again, I'm just I throw those out just to look from the other end of the spectrum for folks that are private or small municipalities that have these structures. So that's one point I'd again make here. So that's it.
Nope, that's a good point. I don't think I've ever run into hey, maybe we should evaluate whether or not the dam should stick around without finding that there's folks on both sides of that fence that are pretty passionate about their reasons for keeping and or removing. It's a tough line to walk. Abby, from an emergency management perspective, I guess you're probably liking everybody's comments about risk and safety, but anything specific you'd like us to make sure that we don't miss out on?
Yeah, actually, there was a couple things that Dan said in his presentation this afternoon that kind of really keyed into me. One of his comments was he said that they really are looking to have a broader statewide portfolio. And that was one of the things that, you know, looking at, he went through and what dams are satisfactory, fair, poor, unsatisfactory, or not rated. And as an emergency manager, I don't know what dams are rated in what condition in my own community. So I know what dams are classified as low risk, significant risk, or high risk, but I don't know their actual status or ranking. And that kind of also goes back to one of his comments was the ability to push for compliancy is really limited right now by levels and their staffing capabilities. They don't have the capability right now to do some owner outreach, education. They're really kind of, I think, tied to putting out fires or dealing, you know, with flooding issues or really impoundment issues. So that enforcement piece of it, I think, also goes into that owner outreach. I work in a position with dam owners that are private, that are municipal, and then we've got, you know, 2 FERC dams. So I see kind of both sides of it. Last year, we had a failure of one of our private dam owners, small dam, and the county had to step in and take emergency protective measures because the owner didn't have the capacity to, in order to prevent this complete collapse of this dam. And now this owner is sitting with the situation of he'd like to do something with it, but there is no resources to do with it. So nothing's been touched since we did our emergency stabilization. So a year later, we're still out monitoring that structure for any additional issues that may occur. So I think it kind of really goes to some of those comments that the other task force members made. Some of the things from a planning perspective, dealing with small dams versus FERC dams, there's an inadequacy with inundation mapping. Flood inundation mapping or modeling for flooding and dam failure on these private dams, even some of the high hazard municipal dams, we don't have good access to data like we do with the FERC dams. So it's difficult to kind of gauge what those impacts may be downstream when you're looking at your emergency plan. The other thing that I really note within Michigan, in comparison to the federal side, dams were required to do emergency of those plans. And whether it's a tabletop, whether it's a community involvement, there's no test or requirement or exercise of those plans from a state perspective that I'm aware of or that I've ever seen. So those are kind of some things that I'm picking up on as a whole community.
Sounds good. You have a tough job, that's for sure. And yeah, I appreciate the idea that it is difficult to find out what's going on at other dams at a granular enough level to be able to determine could that be an impact to my jurisdiction or not to my jurisdiction. And there are dashboards out there for roads, for example. Any of us can go look at what shape are the roads in our communities. It's required by the state. It's pretty easy dashboard to look at, and we can look at a trend line more importantly. And that's an important part of any data set, to be able to, at a glance understand what the trend is. Is this thing upstream of me getting better or worse? Okay, Glenn with Zurich, did you have any comments or hopes or expectations here to cover?
Sure, thank you. A couple thoughts and ideas maybe. As a owner of both FERC and state regulated dams, I get to see the direct comparison between the two programs, comparisons between the two safety programs. And the FERC dam safety program, the requirements there, it greatly exceeds that of the state. But I do also note, though, that the FERC program and the FERC requirements, it could make it actually prohibitive for so many owners. So prohibitive from a cost standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, maybe technical expertise. So, I feel like, and certainly prohibited from the state's capacity to administer the requirements. So I think we have to give some thought in if there's any comparison between the FERC and the state requirements. We need to be cognizant of the different levels there. To that point, I note that FERC safety engineers, they're responsible for about 10 to 20 project sites each. So Dan and Luke, I applaud you guys for taking on such a gigantic workload. There's certainly a difference shown in the two approaches there. The next quick thought was John mentioned the obvious difficulties about FERC sharing the documentation through FOIA processes and everything like that. I just wanted to share really quick for some who aren't familiar with the FERC program and the FERC security requirements. They do classify critical security information based upon infrastructure weaknesses and vulnerabilities and security weaknesses, that are present at these sites. So as a matter of fact, FERC has recently developed a security division, and that's all they look at is security, whether it's electronic, cybersecurity or what, but it got me thinking about what security protocols does the state have, or should the state have, in considering safety standards moving forward. And lastly, I don't know, this is maybe like an outside the box thought, but there's the fairly new asset management program for water and wastewater infrastructure. And the purpose behind that, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but it's generally to force owners to plan ahead for significant replacement, significant expenditures from a maintenance and operations standpoint. And I wondered if I'll give it some more thought, but I wonder if there's anything to draw upon from the asset management program in looking forward long term and long term planning and life cycle and all of that. So those were a few thoughts I had.
Sure. So that last one's kind of that asset management approach where you're seeing water plants, sewer plants, and distribution and collection systems being asked to have more and more clear long-range planning for 100-year assets. Basically, that's the challenge. We all buy a car and we wouldn't drive it until the brakes failed because we all know that doesn't make any sense financially for us, not to mention that it's unsafe. So I'm not sure how to fold it in, but I think that's a critical aspect because it goes right back to the financing thing, as well as Bill's point about, well, what's the exit strategy when this thing is decommissioned? And I would add, wind turbines are another area where that same principle has been brought forward. You're going to be putting in an asset. It's not a 100-year asset, but what are we going to do when you're done utilizing this asset? And I'm not saying I do or don't like Ford trucks or GM trucks or whatever, but I'm not a big Henry Ford fan because he built so darn many dams all over the place, and a lot of them were these low head hydros that people get an affinity toward that is difficult to talk them out of. So I appreciate all the comments everybody had. I will be working with our director and staff here to try to figure out how to put a marching order to those things. I agree with the folks who said that they're inextricably related to each other. So it is hard to say, let's just talk about this today or tomorrow. But I know that past task forces on complicated issues have found a way to break it down that makes sense. And hopefully we'll be able to map that out a little bit, if not for the next meeting, within a couple of meetings, to be able to kind of get a better idea of what we're going to be tackling what order we're going to try to tackle things in. So I do not have any other comments besides those and the fact that we've got a pretty large charge in front of us, and to thank everybody for joining in. Director Clark, anything before we go to public comment that I've missed that we were intending to cover?
Nope. The only thing I would remind folks, and we'll say this again one more time, next meeting, October 1st, 10 a.m., also virtual.
Okay.
So let's
Sounds good.
See what we got.
I have been looking at the attendee list and I'm not seeing any hands up. I know there's a number of people on the phone, so I'm just going to take a stab. I didn't realize I wouldn't be able to see the whole number, but I see that we've got 3 folks from a 231 area code. Was anyone from 231 intending to make public comment today? Right. If not, I see James Pulaski has his hand up.
Yeah, hi, Evan. Jim Pulaski, recent retiree from the DEQ and the Dam Safety Program. I spent over 30 years in the program. Was an engineering consultant prior to working for the department. And now I'm working part-time with Consumers Energy and working in their Owner's Dam Safety Program. I have to commend this group. This review and the charge of this task force is long overdue, and there is a lot to talk about here, as you have all mentioned, and I look forward to seeing what develops, and hopefully I can provide some assistance and counsel to some of you. I know Bill Rustin, you had some questions about the distribution of that funding, and I got a little bit of history on that for you if you want to talk to me about that. And so I spent my entire nearly 40-year engineering career in the dam safety business. Spent time on the board of directors of ASDSO and a past president of ASDSO. So I hope to help you provide some input into this process, and look forward to working with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I'm going to keep going down the
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yep.
Representative Sue Aller's on the line, and she'd like to give some comments too. So Representative Aller.
Go for it. Oh, if you're making comments, we're not hearing you yet, Representative Aller. If you're on the phone, I think it's a *6 to unmute.
Hello?
There we go.
Okay, great. First off, I want to let you know I got on this call at 2 o'clock, and I am thoroughly impressed with the way the conversations have gone, the discussion, the varied backgrounds of everybody on the task force, and I have taken lots of notes. Just in the discussion that you've had, I can see where there are a lot of things that need to be delved into. I'll be anxiously awaiting to hear how your many meetings progress, and want everybody to know, by all means, if you need to reach out to me, I'll be all ears. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, I did see that we had 2 callers from a 734 area code. I just wondered if either of those 2 people had intended on public comment. I'll give you a second or 2. Okay, I'm going to take that as no comments from those folks, but chime in later if I missed you. We've got several callers from a 989 area code. So I'm going to go through them with just the last 2 digits real quick and give you maybe 1 or 2 seconds to jump on. And if you had intended to make comments. So the first one with a 989 ends in 77. Did you intend to make any comments? Going once. Going twice. Okay. I've also got one 989 area code ending in 00. Any intent to make comments today? Going once, going twice. And I will say, I think we will end up with, I believe there is an address on the dam safety website where people can just make a question or a comment, and I would presume that this group will get to see sort of since last meeting, these are the questions and comments that have come in, and any attempts at staff answers, or staff's got to look into them. Is that fair enough, Director?
Yep, that's correct,
Okay.
Evan. Thank you.
So I've got another 989 number ending in 46. Any intent to make comment? Going once, going twice. Okay, another 989 ending in 69. Any intent to make comments? Going once, going twice. Just 5 more to go here. Another 989 ending in 18. Any intent to make public comment today? Going once, going twice. Another one from 989 ending in 63. Any intent to make comments today? Going once, going twice. Another one ending in 33 with a 989 area code. Any intent to make comments today? Going once, going twice. I grew up in the country. I do not have a background as an auctioneer, so I've kind of got to go slow with these. Another 989 area code ending in 91. Any intent to make comment today? Going once, going twice. And the last 989 number I see ends in 97. Any intent to make public comment today? Going once, going twice. I do not see any other hands raised, so at this time I'm going to close the public comment, but folks are welcome to join us in future meetings to make a comment, or as I mentioned, heading to the website that is MI Dam Safety Task Force, all one word, .com, and you can, .gov, sorry, and you can, at michigan.gov, right? And you can,
Michigan.gov/MI Dam Safety Task Force.
thank you. So again, anyone
I'll put
can
it in the
make
chat.
comments that we'll be looking at. And then the final thought is I did hear Dan say that PSC heard a lot of testimony. We might want to think about if there's a way to distill something out of that that might be helpful in what he described. Whether or not we do end up having someone come in to give us a presentation, that might be good, but I'm sure we're thinking of a lot of presentations. But if we do have info to distill, that might be a good thing for us to wrangle about when we figure out the next couple 4 agendas. So. With that, I'm going to follow Robert's rules, which say that the chair can adjourn a meeting when it's time to adjourn it. So today, our meeting is adjourned as of 3:36 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.